You are listening to the Mary Jane Society podcast, where you will meet entrepreneurs, cultivators, scientists, doctors, and inventors in the cannabis industry.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Pam Schmiel. Josh Krane is heading cultivation and manufacturing operations for one of New Jersey's top brands, Garden Greens. He brought his expertise from California, where he started in the medical market and transitioned into rec. He and his partners launched Field Extracts, which won multiple awards like the Emerald Cup and Masters of Rosin, and then sold the company to GlassHouse Farms in 2019. He also ran Forefront Ventures California operations for a few years before setting his sights on the East Coast market. Join us as Josh talks about how he's running one of New Jersey's top cultivation facilities and brands and how he's navigating New Jersey's growing market. Let's welcome Josh. So if we could just start with your background, because I know you do come from California, and I'm not sure if you're from the East Coast, but love to get started on that and then learn what you're doing in the Jersey market.
Sure. I am from the East Coast. I was born in Florida. My family is from Jersey, and so I lived between Florida and Jersey for most of my adolescence. And so I wouldn't say I'm a Jersey native, right? I consider myself, for better or worse, a Floridian. But certainly spent many of my formative years here and got family ties here. And my wife is also from New Jersey.
Oh.
So, as far as background goes, my cannabis career, I was originally one of the founders of Field Extracts in California, which was a small independent extraction brand. And they're pretty early on. So the first to introduce sauce, diamonds, the first sauce pen. And then won quite a few awards, cannabis cups, chalice cups, emerald cups, Masters of Rosin, quite a few domestic and international competitions for extracts. We sold that company to GlassHouse Farms in 2019. So it was about a 5-year run with 4 or 5 year run with Field. Started in the medical era and did the transition to rec, right, as California brought rec online. And then I went to go work for Forefront Ventures, which is a smaller MSO, mostly, I'd say East and Central. Most of their operations are Illinois, Massachusetts, and Washington. And so I went and ran operations for them for their California facility for a couple of years. And as California was imploding, I decided I was going to look for something else, right, in my weed career. And the team here at Garden Greens heard that I was looking and approached me. And it was, a very simple question. How do you feel about New Jersey? I said, well, I'm kind of from New Jersey. I never thought I'd go back I never thought I'd have a reason to be able to go back. And I came out and met the team, saw the facility that they were building, and I think I signed my contract before that trip was over.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really a cool journey. And I also read that the farm that is been in the family for, I don't know, decades. It's a old family farm that they were
Yeah.
agricultural.
So the D'Andrea family are the license holders, and they have a company that's been around since 1917 in Jersey, D'Andrea Produce, largely citrus growers and packagers. And then they expanded into cold packing for other brands, other growers. They've got one of the largest cold pack operations in New Jersey currently. And, I think it was a matter of pride for them, right? There's licenses to be had to grow weed. Well, we grow things. We grow really well. We grow at scale. And I think they were also smart enough to say that they didn't know how to grow weed, right? And so rather than figure it out themselves, they put together, their best shot at an all-star team to bring this license and this vision to fruition, right? And they entrusted me to assemble that team, right? And put together the operation, develop the brands, all the rest. And so, but yeah, the family's history has been in produce for years. We still even use some of their brand assets. So one of our brands is called Pete's Farm Stand. And Pete was the great grandfather of the D'Andrea family and the founder of D'Andrea Produce. And so we tried to draw from the elements of what they do in, traditional agriculture to pay homage to them and their family and their operation in the cannabis business.
Wow, that's cool. I actually saw some data from the Benzinga Spotlight event that, well, you guys, Garden Greens, and I didn't realize that your product was Pete's Farm Stand is in the top selling, um, top 10, 5 or 10
Yeah.
data that.
Garden Greens is typically either first or second, depends on, that first spot seems to be somewhat interchangeable with Ozone, which is Ascend's product, and Rhythm, which is GTI's product. So depending on the week, one of the three of us is in that number one spot. Pete's Farm Stand, I think, is now in the top five. Right. We have a couple of other brands, but we keep them deliberately limited and small. And so I don't think they have the chance to get too high on that list in terms of total revenue or units sold. Um, but the brand family is Garden Greens, Pete's Farm Stand, a brand called Garden State Banana, which is a collab between us and a genetics group in California called Golden State Banana. So their strains, our cultivation. And then we've got our sort of, most top shelf product, which is called Test Kitchen, which is really our test bed for new genetics, interesting things that we want to play with. We handle that one a little differently. We grow it a little differently. We trim it more delicately. Um, and then we've just most recently launched our vape brand, which is called Joystick.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are you well, not vertically integrated, but are you also have an extraction license?
Yes, we are cultivation and manufacturing.
Okay, okay. So you have flour and vapes?
Flour in all of its varieties, right? Flour, pre-rolls, right? Vapes. We're about to launch dabbable concentrates, so specifically rosin and rosin vapes. So more to come. One more brand to unveil here.
Oh, so that's really cool too. I didn't realize that you were doing extracting and all these different brand launches. So and how long has Garden Greens been in the market?
We just hit our year, right? Here in March.
That's crazy. So
Uh, First products were sold first week of March 2024. We got the license in November of 23. All signed off and ready to operate. And so it took us a few months to get plants into the building and right, get them takes, it's a 8 to 9 week grow cycle.
Mhm.
So first products really came on the market first week of March. So we just had our 1 year anniversary.
So and New Jersey has been rec for 2 years now?
I believe that's correct.
So, I mean, what do you think attributes to you guys being as really one of the top brands in New Jersey and a short period of time, a year is pretty short to ramp up and get a brand,
I would
recognized.
love to tell you it's because we're so great,
Yeah.
but let me just give you the truth, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think first mover advantage is the primary driver here. We were the first independent to launch. It was all MSO cultivators when we got open. And I think there was some fatigue, right, on behalf of the retailers from the limited supply. So first mover advantage is very real, right? We had a 6 month head start on most of the other independent cultivators. Um, so I think that's first thing I would mention. Second is we've been relentless with our strain selections, right? We've just put more out and with a higher frequency of new than most others. I quickly realized that Jersey shopped on shiny new objects as opposed to real sort of affinity towards specific strains, right? It wasn't that they wanted a particular strain, like I really want OG or I really want Skywalker or I really want, fill in the blank. It's we've seen all this weed, what's new, right? And so we ran about 50 to 60 cultivars in our first year of operation, right? On a very heavy and quickly updating rotation. So I think that helped quite a bit. And I think that we're really weed people, right? And that authenticity and sort of internal passion for the weed culture, weed itself, right? What we do, we tried to put that forward to the consumer audience and to the shops as much as possible, right? So my theory has always been if they like you and they trust you, you'll find success. And so I think the trust comes from reliably good weed and being, honest and upfront with our customers. And I think the liking us comes from knowing that we're real. We really smoke this weed, right? Like people ask all the time, how do you pick the strains that you're going to grow? And my answer is always pick the things I want to smoke.
Mhm.
And so I think that level of authenticity and our approach to new in the market really paid off for us in New Jersey.
I guess, yeah, what are some of your favorite strains that you're excited about now that you have in the marketplace?
Well, asking me my excitement is different than asking me what we're growing for garden greens, right? In
Okay.
that the things that I was excited about 6 months ago are hitting the menu now, right? Takes 4 months for us to get a strain out into production. So the things that I'm most excited about right now, you won't see until Q3 of this year. I'd say as far as what's currently on our menu, I really love our candy fumes strain. People seem to really love our super lemon haze. People seem to really love our grapes strain, which was formerly known as grape junkie. Um, and I think we've got quite a few. The banana mochi seems to be very popular currently. Um, I think we've got stuff that people are really enjoying right now. Paloma Spritz, very popular strain that we're putting out, formerly known as Mellows. So, right, those are the things that I think the market is most excited about from us now. My personal excitement is stuff that I'll say you'll be surprised and delighted Q2, Q3, Q4, right? Because we're not really stopping on this genetic rotation.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. And also try to compete. I just think of all these different brands, like trying to compete on the flower level just seems so hard to me. Like, a gummy or a beverage or whatever. I feel like your branding kind of, you know, influences people's decisions a lot of times too. But just everybody has, Mylar bags of flour, jars of flour, and it's just kind of overwhelming if you're not really, you know, knowledgeable like at your level. And
Yeah. Certainly there are 37 cultivators now in New Jersey, right? There's definitely a competitive set when it comes to the quality of flower that we're putting out there. I think there's some really good growers on the Jersey market. We try and stay authentic to who we are. We try to make sure that we are growing things that we think people actually want to smoke. Try to make sure that we're getting the best out of those plants, right? And then you have to ignore all the noise, right? We often say we're playing golf. It's me and the ball and the cup. And I try not to get too distracted about how the other players are shooting and instead really focus on how well I'm shooting.
right, right. And so as far as your extraction process, what kind of extraction do you do?
Only solventless.
Only
Yeah.
solventless.
So ice hash and rosin.
Oh God. I mean, that's just the way to go. That's where the market's going to be anyway. And I'm sure you're one of the few. Or we do?
Well, there's 8 or 9 now that are doing solventless in Jersey. I wish the market would go that way. I think that the data tells us that it's actually the smallest segment of extract products in terms of consumer demand, right? As much as as much as it may pain me as a rosin maker, distillate sells 20 to 1. Um, and so, for example, our joystick brand is a distillate and botanical terpenes brand, right? I want products that are great quality that can find mass market appeal. And as much as I would love to convince everyone to just smoke solventless, it's far too price prohibitive still in Jersey to see those levels of adoption grow too much. And, even in compressed and depressed markets like California, where the prices have come down, it still doesn't sell anywhere near as much as live resin or distillate products. So, to us, it's really about focusing on making sure that we are going after categories that we can be a business success and then have products that are of a quality that are, as good, if not better, in each of those categories.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of live resin more than, I mean, is at least our next best option that could kind of be affordable. I feel like a lot of people are doing that. So I'm based in New York, so I'm shopping in the New York market, and one of the top brands here is MFNY, which is a live resin. They're completely live resin across the board on everything that they do. And they are one of the top selling brands. But anyway, solventless would be amazing. But right, I feel like the cost is just still too high, but people would like it.
Yeah.
So as far as cultivation operations and maintaining and are there any challenges that you see here or maybe some systems that you want to bring from California and eventually incorporate into your operations that you're doing here?
Oh, not eventually. We've done that, right? So the grow system that we use here was developed, tested, battle tested in California. The lights that we use, the machines that we use to feed the plants, the right, the EC levels and the actual recipe of our feeds. None of it, we're not here at Garden Greens trying to develop new SOPs there. We took a winning system and put it in place day one. So we have a 20,000 square foot canopy. There are 9 grow rooms, right? Each grow room is segmented into 4 zones that can be fed differently. So we can have 4 different cultivars in each one of those rooms, right, with a different feeding program. There are 2 lighting grids in each room. And so we can light one half of the room differently than we light the other half of the room to give us, right? We use a protocol called crop steering, right? We're giving inputs to these plants to steer them to the effect that we want. We're all indoor. So we're essentially trying to replicate the spring to fall timeline in 60 some odd days inside of a building. And so, uh, right up front, we are much warmer, feeding more often, feeding, more to the plant more often, higher humidities, higher temperatures, spectrum of light is shifted a little more blue, right? And as we go through the life cycle of the plant, we feed a little less. We shift that light spectrum to more red to better emulate what a fall light would be versus a spring light. The temperatures come down, the humidity comes down, but it's a program that's designed to steer that plant into that spring to fall, right, harvest cycle, but 5, 6 times a year inside of a building, even when it's 17 degrees outside.
So it's like some whole environmental system that controls your indoor environment and humidity.
Yeah, we're sensor driven. And so there are macro sensors in every room in the building, including the hallways, processing, packaging, where we can monitor the temperature, the humidity levels, the CO2 level in the room, etc. And then on a micro basis, we use sensors in the plants themselves. So there are representative sensors on each table, right? There's about 24 sensors in each grow room, and that allows us to look at how the plants uptake the nutrients and feed that we give them, how they respond to lighting changes that we make, humidity changes, temperature changes, all the rest, and allow us to observe, right, the plants themselves on a micro basis. And so it's the mix of those macro environmental sensors and then the micro environmental sensors that allow us to keep our eyes on 9,000 plants at a time as they go through this system.
So, at the Benzinga event, there was one panel. I don't think it was the one you were on. They were talking about using AI technology, kind of similar to, crop steering and all this kind of stuff. Have you seen anything like that out there? What do you?
I mean, I've seen it a little bit, right? I haven't investigated it too much. Nothing takes the place of humans.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We've got automated feedings and we've got automated light, you know, timers and spectrum changes, all that we can kind of program in. But in my experience, nothing really takes the place of having a really good cultivation team that's watching all of those inputs and then making human changes based on what they see from the plant.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think, I think the AI will get there, but I don't think they're there yet. And I don't think the AI, a lot of weed cultivation is, quick pivots, right? Understanding where your plant is and then trying to pivot so that, right, you are getting the most out of that on that particular turn. And so, right, I just don't see where the AI is going to be able to respond like a human. It might be very good to help identify where there's potential problems, but I still think it takes a great cultivator to know how to respond and what the response should be.
Just visually looking at the plant, if you know what you're talking about.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as like the curing process, it's just something I've been exploring lately. What is your process for curing or your method?
Uh, so we harvest a room every week. We're on a perpetual rolling harvest. So every week a room is harvested and then replanted within that same week. Um, the weed is hung on hangers, right? We segment the plant into uppers and lowers, right? Essentially the top half of the plant, bottom half of the plant. It's not always as easy as saying like A size buds versus B size buds or bigs versus smalls, but we separate the upper branches. They're all hung on hangers in specialized rooms where we have a very rigid control on environment. We hang dry and cure for 12 to 14 days. And then once it's reached the desired moisture activity and moisture content, we take them down from that room and begin to process them. So bucking, trimming, and then packaging.
I feel like the curing process is such an important step in, preserving all the cannabinoids and or terpenes and things like that. Of course, when it gets to extraction, but is there anything that you would say about that?
Often a thankless job, and way harder than most people think it's going to be. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing that's not out there, right, and sort of readily available, like low and slow, right? Don't rush your cure. Um, right? The faster you dry the weed out, the more you lose the terpenes and all the rest. Um, I'd say VPD and your vapor pressure differential is king. And nothing takes the place of actually investigating and looking at your cannabis daily, right? So, for example, we take moisture content readings every day for those 14 days, sometimes twice a day, and we adjust how that room is operating so that we can truly control that curve. We do not, we think it's, we're a large scaled operation. And so a small 20 light grow can do a lot more to kind of cure longer cures, all of the rest, right? And so we have to give up a little bit of what the ultimate quality could be, right? From a craft grow to a scaled grow, but spending the time to not rush through that initial dry cure, making sure it doesn't spend too much time sitting in between the steps, getting your processing to be as close to real time as possible so that it's going right from the dry room into processing, right? The longer the weed sits, the worse it gets.
Mhm. Oh, so I've also been hearing people talk about aging weed, but I think that's a whole nother, like, I don't know, in the curing process. But anyway, something I'm kind of curious about. But oh, so winding down, I just wanted to kind of touch base on the independent retailers and what you're seeing as far as talking to them and being in the market. Like, what is the state or what are some of the challenges you think? Or are those independents really facing? Is there too much product selection now? Do you think it's oversat,
No.
not oversat? What are they missing? Or, any,
Well, I think the largest challenge that they face is that many of them are first-time business owners,
oh,
right? And that many of them, even though they may not be first-time business owners, it's certainly their first time owning a dispensary. And so the challenges that we see amongst the independents are managing their cash flow, understanding their inventory levels versus their demand, um, right? And then setting their expectations around how the industry works, right? So I just think that there's no boot camp for these retailers, right? You get a license, many of them get them through the social equity program, which is a lottery, but it's really like a loaded gun
yeah,
and no training, right, that goes along with that. And so we see a lot of people who haven't anticipated what their inventory costs are really going to be, haven't anticipated how long it's going to take for them to turn that, right? Don't really understand how quickly they will be able to pay back that because there's a large expectation that a lot of this goes out on terms, right? Um, and so it's the mechanics of managing their business that I think are the most challenging. I think the second largest challenge that most of these independents face is that I think I heard Chris Riggs say at Benzinga that 67% of the state has still opted out of licensing cannabis businesses. And so by inference, right, only 33 some odd percent of the state does have these licenses, but that 33% is issuing five licenses, six licenses, right? In the case of Jersey City, there are 40 licenses out there, right? Atlantic City has 11. So I think that there's a lot of direct local competition, and then these big weed deserts where there's no retailer at all. So I think that's a challenging environment for these retailers to navigate. I think largely what we see is they then begin to compete on discounting and pricing, which is good for the consumer and bad for the rest of us, right? And I don't mean to say, hey, let's keep weed expensive, but
yeah,
the the rush to the bottom has been the thing that has been very damaging in other weed markets, and we're still not really large enough to see massive compression as a result. But when you have five dispensaries that are within a half a mile of each other and they're all competing to see who can get more out of a 20% off, a 25% off, it really does become a price game. And I think that's a tough environment to navigate.
yeah.
Um, so I think those are the largest challenges that we see amongst the independents.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, I think we have, something like 240 dispensaries currently in the state, right? I know there's another 80 or so licenses that are waiting to open. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of them are going to open right on top of each other, and it will be a very competitive marketplace, and they won't all survive. Um, the ones that will be the ones that have the largest war chests and the ones that are best prepared to fund themselves through the attrition of their competition, which is a hard pill to swallow when you're bootstrapping a business on your own and you thought it was you're gonna get open for $500,000 and then come to find out you need three to stay open. Um, And so, I think the that's it's made it an interesting competitive landscape in terms of the retailers and the independents here, right? That combined with the fact that they've just changed the social equity, not just, but recently changed how the social equity ownership rules work. And so it used to be you could have three dispensaries in the state. Most of the MSOs immediately went out and opened three stores. Now you can have a minority ownership in seven additional stores. Every MSO is out trying to grow their footprint to 10 stores, right? Independents are not capitalized well enough to be able to go after 10 locations. And so, I think it makes it more difficult to be an independent in the state. Um, I think ultimately it will be a healthy mix of independents and MSOs that are here. But if there are 10 MSOs in the state and each one of them can get to 10, and we've got 350 or so dispensaries by that point, you should expect a third of them to be MSOs.
Yeah. Wow. So they're stacking their license to get that extra then? They have to bring on some sort of a social equity
Right.
part?
So I think the new rule says they can own up to 30% of the equity in the remaining seven stores, but that doesn't preclude them from co-opting the store and putting their brand on top, right? Deciding how the revenue of the store is split up amongst the ownership group, right? And so you can own 30% of a store, but capture 80% of the revenue. Oftentimes, what they do is they give these social equity operators a job and a salary. And then upon sale of the store, that social equity operator is going to see 70% of the proceeds of the sale. But while it's operating pre-sale, the MSO is the one that's really sort of capturing the revenue from the store.
Mm.
Uh, you know,
Yeah.
and that's not our model. So I'm kind of just speaking through observation here.
Mhm.
But my bet is that the better MSOs will pretty quickly be at a footprint of five and then 10 stores each.
How are you preparing for the impending price compression?
Well, I think my knee jerk would be to put my head in the sand and pray it doesn't happen, but that's not really what we're doing. Um, we've modeled for compression. We expect compression. Um, it's my perspective that I want to be a little behind that curve, right? The MSOs established this market. They established the price points that we all see today, right? When I came in, there were 10 operating cultivators, all MSOs. The $60 eighth was the price that they had set. So we came in at their price point with what we thought was a higher quality product, right? And I don't mean to throw shade at any of them. I think some of them are really great cultivators, but we thought we could do better, right? That's the why else operate a business. Um, they're the ones who are compressing price, right? The independents that have come on have really eroded market share for the MSOs was something like 99% when we started. Market share for the MSOs is somewhere around 80%, now. So that 20% is all the other independents that have popped up. Um, we believe that our products are top quality products. I'm not in so much of a rush to just discount, discount, discount to meet the to meet the pricing that the MSOs are out there. We would prefer that they occupy the mid shelf and that we and the other independents occupy the top shelf. So I do think that pricing compression is coming, right? I think that, these $60 eighths pretty quickly will become $55 eighths and eventually $50 eighths. I think it's in all of our best interests to avoid getting them down to $30 eighths, right? Um, as I spoke to in the panel that I did at Benzinga, right? The premise of that panel was, will Jersey quality ever be as good as California? Right? Which I balked at and said, we're there now. It's only going to get worse. As price compresses, we start having to find ways to reduce our COGS to capture the margins that we need to be a successful business. So things that go by the wayside are fancy packaging. Things that go by the wayside are how long you can sit on a product before it needs to get to market, how quickly you need to trim that product, right? So you start to see things going from hand trim to machine trim, right? Machine package versus hand package. You start trying to find those economies of scale and those efficiencies. That's all in direct opposition to the ultimate end quality of the product. So, I think we are very efficient growers, and our real answer to compression is to make sure that our yields are high enough to balance that out, right? So that our revenues are stable and, healthy while the list price of our product creeps downward.
Right, right. And then the last question is, what about d what do you think down the road if borders open up, like being on the East Coast, trying to compete with weed from California or the Northeast or the Northwest, now that you're here growing in the East, do you do you do you think there would be a big imbalance, or do you think it'll crush the farmers here on this side, or?
It's an interesting question. I think that indoor weed, in theory, should be the same quality everywhere, right? And so if it's that much cheaper to produce it in another state, right, that they have a pricing advantage. But for the most part, that's largely driven by utility costs, cost of labor, right, and rent or sort of, your overhead. Um, I do think that I do think that if borders open up, what you will see a lot more of is the mid and the bottom shelf being fueled out of large outdoor cultivations in states like California, where the environment is such that you can grow throughout the year, as opposed to just the spring to fall grow cycle.
Right.
But I think that on that same token, it doesn't necessarily make sense to get indoor weed from California. The indoor weed from New Jersey is just as good. It will be about where the pricing differential is. And so if prices normalize on a national scale, I don't think it makes any sense. Budweiser's bottled in every state that it is. It's not like you ship that across borders. So I think you'll see something akin to alcohol when it comes to that. I think you'll see brands set up indoor cultivations as distribution points, right, that are closest to where their actual customers are.
Right.
And that you'll see cheap weed coming out of big states that have warm climates, right? California, Oklahoma, right, where there's lots of fertile ground and they can produce biomass at scale. But I ultimately think that that product is middle of the matrix, bottom of the matrix in terms of quality.
You guys, being number one brand in New Jersey, that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah,
That's great
we
for
didn't do this to be number one, but it's very neat to be there, right? I'm very proud of the team that we have here. I'm proud of the product that we're able to put out. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to have an impact on this market and this business. And I'm very, very grateful to the weed consumer in New Jersey because they're who we do this for. And it's a very discerning customer, right? And they do have quite a few options and they overwhelmingly select us. And so my challenge is to keep us relevant and to keep us desirable to that customer that has almost too much choice,
Mhm.
right? And so
Yeah,
we keep trying to just make sure that we are as top of mind as we possibly can be, as relevant as we can be, and it goes back to that like and trust. Do they like us and do they trust us? And if you can check those two boxes, the weed will sell.
yeah. And also to me, what's really important when I'm looking for a brand is the only couple brands that I really buy is knowing their farming practices. I want to know their, good farming practices, regenerative or whatever, organic or, things like that. And then their extraction processes. So anyway, but it's great. And I really love that so many growers from the West Coast are coming in, the tri-state area, well, New Jersey and New York
Well,
to,
this is the best market in the country right now,
yeah,
right? Everybody knows that. And most of these operators that are in established markets are painfully beaten up, right? It's a survival game in most cannabis markets.
Yeah.
I like to say this often. I hope it makes the podcast.
Mhm.
I challenge everyone to tell me another consumable product that is expected to decrease in price over time.
Mm.
Nobody has an answer. It's weed. It's the only consumable product. Milk goes up, right? Pasta gets more expensive, right?
Right,
Inflation
everything
affects
goes up.
everything. Um, it gets, more expensive by a factor of 5 to 10% per year for me to operate this business. And there's simultaneously an expectation that my prices will be 30% lower than they are today.
No, it's
So
it's very difficult. This is a
while the prices are high, while the number of competitors is small, while the store count is still relatively manageable and small, and while this is still feels like a limited license market, people are looking at Jersey from outside going, oh, we got to get there, right? If I grow weed it cost me $600 a pound to grow indoor weed, and I'm in California, and the best I can do is sell that for $1,100, right? That same $600 cost per pound in New Jersey is a $3,000 pound, right, at wholesale. And so, right, all these people who are looking to have viable businesses are looking at Jersey as, right, survive, like their next step in surviving as a business. Unfortunately, that's what is going to drive this state into compression, right? Because ultimately, one too many competitors, and then someone's like, well, I got to sell the weed, so I'm going to discount it. And
yeah.
then it becomes this race to the bottom. So we'll see how long Jersey can hang on to that most desirable market moniker.
Yeah.
But for now, at least, this seems to be where everyone I know is going, oh, I'm going to Jersey next. So the landscape
Brand
will get more competitive